Hi there, welcome to Lara la Beaut, and I'm here to share with you the books that I read in September. So the first book I read is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas, or Alexandre Dumas if you're French, I think. Now I didn't start this in September, this was my summer book. I just like to have a summer book that I sort of savor slowly, like I go into it and then I stop reading it and then I go back into it. And this was really hard to put down, so I couldn't exactly read it slowly like I like to do. Now I had definitely seen animations of the story, but I had never read the book. So I decided to read it this summer, and this is such a lovely story. I really love this book. I love the way he wrote this book. I think everyone knows the storyline behind this. It's about a young sailor called Monte, French guy. He is wrongly accused and is set up by a jealous friend of his and is imprisoned for life. And while he's in prison, he realizes, with the help of a sort of priest who he befriended inside the prison, the abbot or the priest guy that he befriends in prison, he tells this Monte about a treasure that is on the island of Monte Cristo. Basically, he breaks out of prison, gets filthy rich, and then spends the next 10 years just seeking revenge on the people that wronged him. Now this story isn't just about revenge, it has several themes to it, and I just love the way he wrote this book. It's just an awesome escape story, just full of adventure, and I found myself just living in the dungeon with him. You know those books that just take you with them? And I was just really captivated by 19th century France and Greece, and he really describes everything so vividly. This is why I tend to like books that are written by artists during the time that the artist is alive. I recently read somewhere that a true artist reflects the times. I don't completely agree with that definition. I don't think there's one true definition of an artist, but I'm just trying to say that when a writer writes about the time that they're living in, it usually makes such a good book, and this was a really good book. It's quite long, but I didn't even notice the length of the book. That's how amazing it is, and it just makes me want to read his other works like The Three Musketeers. A really good story, I love this. The second book I read is Master of the Game by Sidney Sheldon. Now this was a reread because I read this when I was about 14 years old, and I used to be really in love with his kind of storytelling. Now Sidney Sheldon books, they usually have a female protagonist, and he usually describes these women as very beautiful, very driven, sometimes very hungry for power, manipulative. And in this book, this female is called Kate Blackwell. The book extends over 3 generations. Starts with Kate's father, who goes to South Africa during the diamond rush. That's like late 19th century that was happening then. He eventually gets really rich, and his business just expands, and eventually Kate just takes over the business and just blows it up, turns it into a massive empire. There's a lot of greed in the story, a bit of love, but mostly greed. She just gets very obsessed with this company and will basically do anything and step on anything that comes between her and the company, whether it's a husband or a sister or a granddaughter. This is just a really nice storyline. I really enjoyed this book again, and I didn't particularly fall in love with any of the characters. They all seem very... I felt like he did tie things up too quickly in the end. I mean, he just said, then this happened, then that happened, and the end. You know, I was looking forward to I was very much looking forward to a bigger ending, but that might have been because I've read the book before, so it wasn't such a surprise to me, even though I had forgotten most of the story. So this was a good read, quick read. Next up is David Mitchell's Cloud Atlas. I was really excited about reading this book because I'd seen the trailer to the film. This was a few years ago, but I wanted to really make sure I read the book before I saw the film, and this, which I did. I have watched the movie as well. I think this book is, you either like it or you don't like it. Now this was a very unusual book to read for me, but it was also very good. I really liked it. I struggled in the beginning to get into it because you can't really tell what is going on, because it sort of extends over different lifetimes or generations. So but eventually the stories become interlinked and you sort of make sense of what the book is about, even though it's not about just one. It's basically about 6 people's lives, but it also gets a bit political. It talks about just human nature and how our lives are interlinked, whether it's individuals or tribes or races. It's very difficult to put into words, but I will say that I loved this book. It's written in a very unusual way, and this David Mitchell, he just wrote a really excellent novel. Now the next 2 books that I read were in ebook format, and the first one is Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, and it's about creative living beyond fear. I really enjoyed this book, very inspirational, very just full of wisdom. This is about, well, it's mainly about creativity. I like the way that she wrote this book. It's very casual, very laid back. It's almost like she's talking to you as a friend. This book I think is a great help if you're in a creative rut, or you're just thinking too much about being creative and how to be creative. She talks a lot about inspiration and refers to inspiration as a living entity rather than just an idea. This book is basically very encouraging, and the author talks a lot about what attitude to have when approaching your particular craft. She basically emphasizes on taking your work very seriously and at the same time treating it like it doesn't mean anything and finding that balance. She also talks about putting your ego in check but not completely trying to eliminate it because you need it. This book should just have the Nike tick, because it's basically saying just do it. Don't think about how great it is or how disappointing your work is. Don't think about being rewarded for your work or being criticized by it, and just move on to the next thing and just create and move on to the next thing. And once you create and put it out there, let that be the end of it and just move on to creating something else. She definitely writes from a writer's point of view, but this can be applied. The wisdom in this book, I think it's quite wise. The wisdom in this book can be applied to any art form. And the final book is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I read this book because I'm just an avid reader of anything to do with the Holocaust. I know that's a bit grim, but I just love to know what happened in those times. But this isn't a usual book about the Holocaust. This was written by a psychiatrist who happened to be a prisoner at Auschwitz, who looks at things through a psychiatrist's eyes, and he uses himself and his memory of other prisoners to sort of decipher what went on or what happened internally to a prisoner in the 3 stages, just being admitted to the camp, life in the camp, and what a prisoner went through internally after being released. He writes with such a dark humour because I found myself laughing, but at the same time you're like, is this really funny? Oh, he uses a lot of aphorisms, he uses a lot of poetry as well. The second part of the book talks about logotherapy, which is a type of therapy that he came up with. And what he's basically saying is that man's happiness depends on his life having a meaning. And this meaning must and can only be fulfilled by this one person. So the meaning of life is essentially different for every human being. So there is no one meaning. And then logotherapy is just a type of therapy which I guess he would use to decipher what that meaning is for any particular person. So it's all about finding what that meaning is for an individual. Yeah, so that was a really good book to read. I would probably go through it again because I enjoyed it that much. And I just really enjoy books about psychiatry and just ways of looking at things, different perspective. So that's it for my September wrap up. I will be posting an October TBR in the next few days. So yeah, thanks so much for watching. Bye.